We got one more guest for this Wednesday edition of the show here. That is Wes Reynolds, at Wes Reynolds, and the number 1 on Twitter. Wes, how's it going today, man?
Good morning, Adam. Doing well. How about yourself, sir?
Doing very well. Appreciate your time as always, bud. Thank you so much for joining me. And, it's a very busy time of the year, obviously, with the holidays and college hoops and everything that's going on. But got to say, man, I feel like I put everything aside at this time of the year to really focus in on the bowl season. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, and I think, this week with college hoops being a little bit slow with finals week, that's an appropriate thing to do. And I mean, obviously still focusing on the spell in the late season as teams are making playoff pushes. So, there are some things that you just have a finite amount of time in the day. So like, I find myself with NBA, putting that off a little bit and doing a little bit less and trying to be a lot more picky because, I think for some people, everybody's different. I mean, some people, NFL's hardest. Some people, college basketball's hardest. For me, I think like the NBA is the hardest just because of the different dynamics, the season starting earlier, guys resting, a lot of different dynamics in the NBA. So I try to be a little more picky with that and maybe just only look for maybe certain spot plays so I can concentrate more on stuff like the bowls.
Yeah, and, the bowl season, there's so much that goes into it. It's such a complex kind of handicap because you're handicapping coaches. You're trying to handicap, the personalities and the mindsets of these teams. You're handicapping the locations of the bowl games, the opponent, how excited is a team to play, against that opponent. There's a lot going on that goes into it, and we almost forget at times that it's still a football game. It's still 11 on 11. It's still scheme versus scheme, coordinator versus coordinator, all that type of thing. I think we kind of lose that in the shuffle a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just because there's a lot of angles, and it used to be, and it's always been this way for bowls. I think, looking at different handicaps, motivation, I still think is the key angle in terms of, who's excited to be there, who's disappointed that had bigger aspirations and now find themselves in a lesser bowl game. You always had to handicap in terms of personnel, in terms of, hey, who's going to blow off steam during these finals weeks and who's going to get arrested or who's going to get in trouble, who's going to get suspended. Then you had to handicap, coaches, the coaching carousel and coaches that are leaving and, if they're going to stay and coach the bowl game and how motivated the team is if they do, or if it's going to be an interim guy or whatever. And then now, in recent years, what's emerged is you have to have handicapping player personnel in terms of guys sitting out bowl games for preparation for the NFL draft or to protect draft stock. So that's another new wrinkle over the last few years that you've had to add to this whole thing.
Yeah, and there are some games where we've already seen that have a little bit of an impact. Obviously, the Camping World Bowl being the biggest one with Will Grier deciding to sit out for West Virginia. And the thing that's frustrating to me is I liked Syracuse to begin with and didn't play it. I was kind of going through these bowl games in stages and, obviously trying to keep up with everything else that I cover at Bang the Book and, didn't play it. And now I lost idea going forward. I mean, obviously we can't do this year, but it's maybe not a bad idea to throw some early lines out there, take a position, just sort of anticipating that, some of these guys will sit out.
Yeah, and I mean, and you have to take a little bit of a risk too, because and a little leap of faith because you don't know. Because it was like I was very, conservative in terms of playing anything early, and I've missed some value on games. There's still some games where I've missed the best number, where I still think that there's a little bit of value, but I mean. You have to, I guess, take a little bit of a leap of faith, not knowing. I mean, Grier was not somebody I expected to sit out. I mean, we all expected, like, Rashawn Gary to sit out for Michigan. the wide receiver, Harry, to sit out for Arizona State, you know, those type of things. But, I mean, that Syracuse game is a very good example because, I mean, it was one of the highest totals on the board. And I mean, you've seen this total dip like 6 points where maybe there's a little bit of value on the over despite the fact that Will Grier is not played just because of the explosiveness of the offense. But, you know, you wanted to take Syracuse, at 6 or 5.5 or even 6.5, and now it's 1.5. So, I mean, sometimes you get shut out on these things. And, I mean, so it's a calculated balance where it's like, I want to get in early to get the best number, but I want to wait until the breaking news because that's the last thing I want to do is be stuck on a position that, you know, is going to move 4 or 5 points against me and then, you know, debating whether I should buy out of the position or whether I should just keep it and hope for the best.
Well, and it's also tough, too, in terms of getting ahead of the numbers. I mean, I've talked about this already on the show here that, you know, I've had some games where I've had some big overlays relative to the market where, you know, the last several weeks in college football, we've been comparing these teams against their conference opponents. Now we're going outside the conference. So I'm not surprised that I have some gaps out there. But it's one of those things where, you know, because past conference performance seems to mean a lot to some of the early bettors that are out there. For example, you look at these MAC games. You know, we just talked about a few of them with Brian Leonard in the previous segment. Georgia Southern taking money against Eastern Michigan. UAB taking money against Northern Illinois. San Diego State starting to take money against Ohio. FIU taking money against Toledo. The BYU line may just be too high for people to take BYU there. But, you know, even if from a power rating standpoint, I liked one of the MAC teams, there's no incentive to go out there and get it because right now there's a big MAC fade going on. But what if that wasn't the case? What if it was one of those games where the market looked at it and went, you know what? I like the MAC team there. You know, so there's so much that goes into trying to play openers for these. I'm almost not so much worried about the lost line value unless it's a big case like the Camping World Bowl where it's moved, you know, 5-6 points.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you still have to, I think, look at the individual matchup, and you still have to, you know, look at the different styles of play, and you know, if you got a team that's having to play like a team that maybe runs a different type of offense, like an option, you know, like like Georgia Southern and Eastern Michigan in that Camellia Bowl, where I think that's one reason why Georgia Southern is getting money because, you know, Eastern Michigan may not see the option a lot, or if playing like an option team, and maybe they've seen it a couple times. I mean, one example, I think, because one game I liked early when the matchups were made, and I didn't play it, and I'm still debating what to do, is Armed Forces Bowl with Houston and Army. You know, looking at Houston's numbers, I mean, even with Ed Oliver, who's another player that's a likely high first-round draft pick that's sitting out, even with that, Oliver, this team is not very good defensively, but they have played a couple option teams already this year, including Navy. So it's not like they've never seen what Army is going to run. And the fact that, you know, you're having 3-4 weeks, it depends on if you're early in the bowl season, like this weekend, or if it's next weekend or the weekend after. I mean, will you get more time to practice against this thing? So I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen the line kind of come down a little bit on Army from the opener of 5, and now it's, you know, 3 with some juice, because, you know, Houston, as bad as their defense has been, has, you know, this isn't going to be totally foreign to them seeing this option.
Now, one thing I think can be really profitable for people out there during the bowl season, and I know that this is something that you do a lot. You do a lot of derivative betting. You'll take a full game position, kind of usually double up on it with the first half, and then maybe look to middle and either guarantee profit or hit that 3-0. I feel like bowl games set up really, really well for that kind of strategy.
Yeah, I mean, you want to I mean, I think if you like a team to cover a game, you're going to end up liking them in the first half and thinking that they may have the lead. So, you know, that's one reason I look into doing that, at least on a couple of occasions during the bowl season where, a team is going to come out more prepared or a team is going to come out more emotionally high. So, when you're playing on emotion, some teams may have it right away and then it dissipates over the game, but some teams, just may not have it from the opening kickoff. Not all of these bowl games are going to be close. Some of them are going to be blowouts, and some of the games that, we think are going to be low scoring, because I think sometimes we look so much into, the stats, and that's an important, but we look so much into the stats, and then we get surprised on something, if you have two really top defenses, and then all of a sudden it's a shootout in a bowl game, or we think this bowl game is going to be in a shootout and it goes under by 20 points. So, you can't just automatically assume that season stats are going to kind of follow a pattern, because these are teams by and large that are playing games every week. Well, now they have a different dynamic where they have, some cases maybe as small of a gap as 2 weeks and some maybe 4 weeks from the last time that they played. And a lot can change over that time span. So you can't assume that everything's going to hold to 4, I guess, in terms of, what a typical pattern is over a regular season.
Well, and again, too, it's one of those things where, you kind of inherently limit your risk a little bit, too, going the derivative route or maybe waiting for a live betting opportunity. Because, again, there's a lot of guesswork that goes into these bowl games, trying to figure out which teams want to be there, which teams don't, which teams are going to be ready to go. The interim situations, for example, we got 3 of them here this year, Utah State, Appalachian State, and Temple. Well, I look at Temple, and they are facing a coaching disadvantage now. As much of, as exciting as Ed Foley's press conference was in Shreveport yesterday, David Cutcliffe is still a damn good head coach and a damn good underdog head coach. So Temple's facing a coaching disadvantage here. So I would expect Duke to be the better team in the first half. I would expect them to scheme better, to prepare better, to game plan better. Maybe Temple ultimately wins, but that's something I can look at here where maybe I don't take Duke plus the 3.5 for the full game, but if I really believe in that coaching advantage, I can take that first half play and then see as the game goes along, if I do maybe want to make another live full game position on them. That's one of the beautiful things about live betting, derivative betting in the bowl games is that, we can limit our risk a little bit and also take some of that uncertainty out of the equation.
Yeah, and speaking on that Duke game, you have a Duke team that got absolutely embarrassed in their last game by Wake Forest. Now, that was a Wake Forest team that needed to get that 6th win to get bowl eligible, so they maybe had more to play for, and Duke had just come off that Clemson game where they put a lot into it. So, Duke was really flat and got absolutely annihilated. So it's like, hey, are we going to come and, is that going to be the defining moment of our season, or are we going to come out focused? So, that's a perfect example. You talked about the coaching change, like at Appalachian State, one of the places I like Middle Tennessee State, because a lot of us follow this regularly. We saw that press conference, where Rich Stockstill and his son Brent, who's been the quarterback and has been in that program for 6 years, they were pretty devastated, losing the Conference USA title game to UAB at home. But now this is their last chance. They have a chance to go out as winners in the New Orleans Bowl against Appalachian State, who is a better team and is a really good defense. But they have that opportunity. This is going to be their last game together. And 6 years is a long time to spend, as a coach, quarterback, and then obviously a father-son dynamic in addition to that. So, it's not necessarily just that Appalachian State, has their coach, Scott Satterfield, has gone to Louisville. It's the fact that Middle Tennessee might be really motivated here.
Well, and another thing I like to do from a derivative standpoint, and I've had success with this in the past, is I'll take a full game under position and I'll play the first half under, and then, really look to hope for, a pretty big middle with some key numbers in the second half. Because one of the things about these bowl games is that a lot of them are truly neutral site games. Yeah, you've got some home field advantages here and there, but a lot of these are truly neutral site games, which means there's not a whole lot of people there. And these teams in the first half, you haven't played in 3 or 4 weeks, and then you have to create your own energy on top of it. And sometimes I think these games do come out a little bit tight, a little bit sluggish, and I kind of like that angle of a full game under, a first half under, and look to play that second half over and either, go 2-1 or 3-0. It's something I really enjoy doing at the bowl season, and I think the nature of these games sets up well for it.
Yeah, and I mean, with these numbers, like if you have a big movement, the temptation is to follow that movement. But oftentimes, you can take a stand and maybe play against that movement. If a total has moved 5-6 points one way, let's say it's moved to the under, maybe you could take the first half over. There's a lot of times when you get that CLV and, hey, guys will talk on social media, hey, I've got 6 points of this, I've got 6 points better of the number, where inevitably you may win, but you may be behind early. So, if I see something that has moved that much, I'm going to maybe go a little bit opposite. This is something I do a little bit in the NFL as well, and in college basketball, where and other sports as well, where I'm going to, kind of play against that huge line move, and just, and take my chances that I'm going to go against the grade here. I mean, I'm seeing the Houston Army total, I believe, opened at 67.5, and I'm seeing as low as 60 in the market now. Obviously, you have to check weather for that as well. I mean, because that can always be the great equalizer. But, I'm more inclined to play against a big move like that, because I think what happens is you get that move, and then you have piggybackers come in, and that will follow that move. So, and then that even makes it more of a move and gives more value to the other side.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too where, sometimes what happens in those last couple regular season games has a pretty big impact on the Bulls here. And, for Army, I mean, they had trouble scoring points against Navy. And maybe that's why one of the reasons why that total has come down, because you would think Houston going in there without Ed Oliver, one of the best players in the country, you would think that would hurt them from a defensive standpoint going up against Army. Now, of course, De'Ara King being out doesn't help. It was already built with him out of the game in mind. So, it's always fascinating to look at line moves here for the bowl season, the timing of line moves as well. It's just, it really is complex. I know that we've spent a lot of time on it here on the show, but that's by design, because there are so many nuances to it that you have to keep in mind. It is a very time-consuming handicap.
And I think that, oftentimes, too, we look a little bit too much for the hot team and looking to go against kind of the cold team, if you will. But like I was saying earlier, those hot teams, I mean, they've all played like consecutive weeks and week after week, and now you get a stop in that momentum in terms of having this time off and having to go through the holidays and having to go through finals weeks and everything in between. And so I think a lot of that, because people are always tempted to take the hot team, or take the team with the really great ATS record, which I think is so overrated and so overvalued. Hey, they're 10-2 against the spread, even if they might be like 7-5 straight up, So tempted to take that hot team or that team that's on a cover streak. Well, I mean, this whole dynamic and this whole time off changes all of that.
All right, let's transition away from college football, because I do want to hit on a couple of NFL games with you pretty quickly here, Wes. And we'll start with game 317-318 on the board between the Packers and the Bears. And we saw some 5.5s out there in the marketplace yesterday on this game. Those are gone. We opened 6.5. We're at 6, pretty much market wide. Now, I don't see a 5.5 offshore. Maybe you see one on your screen out there in Vegas. But, this is an interesting game to me because it sort of feels like a last stand kind of game for Green Bay after that must-win game last week. I still don't think they can make the playoffs, but, maybe they think that they can. Chicago has played at such a high level for so long here. I feel like there's a letdown coming. I just don't know if it's this week.
Yeah, I'm really the same way because, the Bears are going to be as priced as high as they can be right now. And you look at the NFC with the two teams that are still the favorites, the Saints and the Rams, but, there's still some doubt a little bit with those teams. I mean, New Orleans got the win in Tampa Bay, but started out very sluggish. Only had some then kind of, were able to run away and hide very late in the fourth quarter. But, and you also look at the Rams and that they got held without a touchdown, and there's a discussion whether the Rams maybe have peaked at this point. So now you're seeing people kind of start to turn their eyes in that NFC to the teams like Chicago and Dallas, and then now with the narrative this week has been on Seattle that, hey, watch out for this team, because I don't think people are totally convinced, like maybe they are in the AFC, that in whatever order you want to put them in, that Kansas City, New England, San Diego, or Los Angeles Chargers are the best three teams in the AFC and really have been all year. So, I mean, looking at the Bears here, I mean, their defense obviously had one of the most impressive performances of the season, probably matching Dallas's against New Orleans on Thursday night a couple weeks ago. But, Mitch Trubisky still threw 3 interceptions. It just happened that the other quarterback, Jared Goff, threw 4. So, I mean, sure about believing in the Bears just yet. They have this, if you want to call it revenge, because we remember the Week 1 game on Sunday Night Football where they were up 20-0. They had knocked Aaron Rodgers out of the game, and he came back and led a comeback. But the Bears should have won that game. So are they like, hey, we've been waiting 3 months or 2.5, 3 months to get a crack at these guys, and now we have it? Or, does Green Bay, I mean, I think, I still think Green Bay is going to try here, even if their playoff hopes are slim, because all these teams that are fighting for that wild card spot keep losing. Minnesota keeps losing. Philadelphia keeps losing. Washington, is pretty much done. And I think they've pretty much nailed in their season. So maybe Green Bay still thinks that they can get in there. I mean, right now I don't have the confidence to take them, but I definitely don't want to lay Chicago here.
Well, and I think, too, I mean, we look at what happened in that Packers game last week, and obviously it was a 34-7 game after 3 quarters, and Atlanta put, some cosmetic points up on the board. But Green Bay had a pick 6. Green Bay only had 300 yards of total offense in that game, only 4.9 yards per play. I don't think that we can, definitively say, hey, the Packers are fixed, or, hey, things are going to change without Mike McCarthy. Aaron Rodgers was pretty pedestrian in this game. He got sacked 4 times. I think that maybe there could be some overreaction to that Packers performance out there. I think if you like the Bears, you may get a better number on this game just before kickoff.
Yeah, I would definitely wait. I mean, it's not necessarily the team I want to take, but the number may dictate the play here, where I want to look a little bit at Chicago at Chicago. That said, I don't think that they're necessarily in the best spot, but I think I need a little more convincing on Green Bay, and I think maybe this week would be the convincing. So as of right now, it's a pass for me.
All right, let's go to the Sunday Night Football game here, 3:30, Philadelphia and the Rams. And, in fact, some breaking news here on this game that Carson Wentz is not going to play here in Week 15, not going to make the trip out to or may not even make the trip out to Los Angeles. And if the Eagles lose this game, and they are almost a double-digit dog to lose this game, Carson Wentz's season may be over. So that throws an extra little wrinkle into this game, and it's kind of a bummer for me because I sort of liked the Rams anyway. I think Philadelphia was kind of in that, last stand type of situation last week and played pretty well for the most part despite losing in overtime. I'm not sure how much they have in the tank. The question here, though, is the Rams don't look like a team capable of blowing anybody out.
Yeah, I mean, as talented as they are on defense, I mean, this is a team that, that you can move the ball on and a team that you can score points on. And I mean, with Philadelphia, I mean, I do think if they had won last week in Dallas, where it would have been kind of a faulty win considering Dallas did outgain them by about 300 yards, I think, Wentz probably would have tried to give it a go this week. But now you wonder if, he might even play the rest of the year. They may kind of, say, okay, let's look long-term here and shut it down and maybe think that, we look forward to next year. I mean, we're going to have to see, but I mean, I really, I didn't really want to take the Eagles, but because I wasn't sure, because I think we've been waiting for that team to kind of flip the switch and say, okay, they just had a Super Bowl hangover, they're struggling a little bit, but now at the end of the season, they're going to turn it on and find their way into the playoffs, because it seems like nobody wants to hit that last playoff spot in the NFC because everybody keeps losing, which is why I think Green Bay has a more realistic chance than maybe initially we think. But, now going to a Los Angeles team that, that's been, I think, a legitimate question is, have they peaked too early? And sometimes teams do that. So, I mean, I'm not sure what the line is going to be put out at. I mean, it was 9.5 some places. I mean, it's obviously going to probably be slightly north of double digits with the Rams. Most books have, I think, taken the game off the board. But, I mean, I don't think it'll be a huge adjustment where it's going to be like 13.5 or 14 or something ridiculous like that. But, you may 10.5 or 11. So, I mean, this is a game that I'm not really inclined to play now because I want to see how Philadelphia's mental state is if, hey, we're going to shut down the season, or if they say, you know what, we've been through it before with when we had Nick Foles last year and we went all the way to the Super Bowl, so maybe, maybe that's a jolt for them. I mean, I don't think Carson Wentz has really had a good season. I think it's largely due to that back injury. And I think teams kind of figured out when you get a guy on film, how to defend him a little bit, and they adjust to you, and then you have to adjust back to them. So, I mean, this is a game, at least for right now, I'm going to look to stay away from. Maybe I find something on Sunday in terms of a halftime or a first half play that I tend to like, but as of right now, I'd stay away.
Well, and when you look at the Rams here, I mean, 2 weeks ago they did beat the Lions by 14, but Detroit was 1 for 5 scoring touchdowns in the red zone in that game. So the Lions did move the football, did get into a position to score points. They just weren't able to capitalize inside the 20. That's the only blowout win for the Rams here since their win over the 49ers 39-10. And then prior to that, in terms of a blowout, you got to go all the way back to week 3 against the Los Angeles Chargers. So they're just not capable of blowing teams out. Maybe they do it this week, but it has been a bit of a struggle for them overall this season. Wes Reynolds, who's working and follow on Twitter at Wes Reynolds and the number 1. Appreciate the time as always, Wes. Thank you so much, man, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Good to be with you. Thank you.